Welcome to the Uncensored Self Podcast. I am your host, Ryann Gillen, and this is a space where women who value achievement, success, accomplishment, and wealth, but also crave happiness, love, joy, and deep fulfillment come to remember that we get to have both. Not by doing more, but by being more of who we truly are. In this show, we explore identity, energy, alignment, and embodiment because you didn't come here to follow someone else's rules. You came to right your own. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the Uncensored Self Podcast. I am your host, Ryann Gillen, and today we are talking about the energetic split that's keeping high-achieving women stuck in a cycle of burnout, bitterness, resentment, unfulfillment. And we are calling this the Feminine Energy Archetypes. And this is actually a whole new body of work that I am developing and re-releasing my flagship program, which we will talk about later. But we are going to talk about the feminine energy archetypes and how our doer energy, our dreamer energy, and our alchemist energy actually is the magic to creating exactly what you want. So if you are somebody who felt like you're doing all of the right things and you're working really hard and you're just like you're checking all of the boxes, but something still doesn't feel right. Maybe you're not getting the results that you want as quickly as possible. Maybe, you have some results, but you feel again empty and unfulfilled, like I'd mentioned before. This is actually why. This is what I realized. If I had to pin what had happened over the course of my life when I achieved a whole lot of success and constantly felt burnout, it was this. It was this imbalance of energy where I had been overly relying on my doer energy, my masculine energy, so much so in a way that I had completely forgot about my dreamer energy, forgot about my gifts, forgot about that, and then wound up in this really masculine place in my life where everything was about doing and performing and achieving and more on top of more. And this conversation is actually why I'm revamping so much of what I teach, because the personal development world taught us how to achieve, right? How to do things, but not how to receive. And feminine energy is all about receiving, right? So even still in this personal development work, even if you're seeing a therapist or you bought a course or you've worked with a coach or, you've done some of this, it's still about how do I achieve this really specific goal? And while that is great, I want you to achieve every single goal that you have for yourself and for your life. I think that it has left such a big gap that we don't know who we are without those achievements. And when we learn to balance our energy, right, our doer energy and our dreamer energy is when we enter into that alchemist energy, that alchemy energy where pure magic happens, but we have to learn how to leverage both. Because if all we're ever doing is chasing things outside of us, we will always feel empty and unfulfilled. And again, if you haven't been here, I'm going to tell the story. So if you've heard it before, I'm sorry, but there's so many new people that have been popping into my world that I feel like this conversation really matters, because I literally built a 7-figure business in 3 years by being the doer, right? I wound up in a director level corporate job by being the doer. I wound up in a 6-bedroom, 5-bath house with a brand new car and 2 babies and a semi-retired husband, now ex-husband, by being the doer. I knew how to get shit done. I was competent. I was efficient. I was respected. Everything that we are taught that success should be and how success should feel and look, I had achieved, at least to the point that I could see for myself at the time, right? I obviously know that there's way more available, but at the time that was all that I was looking for. And I had checked every single box and I was unhappy and unfulfilled. And on top of that, I felt guilty for feeling that way. I had this like, what the fuck is wrong with me that I can't just be happy and grateful for what I have? So I had mastered the external success game, what we call the mind game here on the show, right? But I didn't feel alive. I wasn't living my life. I was achieving things. And when I discovered the energy game, first it was like, okay, this is really cool. I can use my energy to create. But what wound up happening is it just became something else to do. It just became something else that, to put it on my to-do list, become a better version of myself, add that to my 4 billion tasks today, right? So I had been operating in my masculine identity the majority of my adult life. And unfortunately, not the healthy masculine, right? Like masculine energy is amazing and it is good and it is important, but there is unhealthy masculine, right? The over-functioning, over-responsibility, over-efforting is unhealthy across the board. I don't care who you are or what goals you're trying to accomplish. It is unhealthy to constantly be in this feeling of overdrive. And it's putting so much stress and pressure on our bodies to the point where we're unable to sleep at night, right? Our fucking hair is falling out. And I know a lot of this is hormones and things like this, but I also think that the reason why our hormones are so out of whack is because we are so out of balance. And so, when I first really started studying energy, obviously there was a lot of things, but when I started understanding the law of gender, which is a law that I don't think is talked about enough, is when things really started to shift for me, because not only did I understand that my energy creates, I understand how do I find the balance between doing and being. Because when I learned about intentional reality creation, this idea that, my thoughts create my reality, like that's amazing. But what am I supposed to do with that? Like, how am I supposed to spend my time? At the time I was running a business, like a really big business with employees and all this other stuff. Like the idea of like I could just stop doing what I was doing to achieve the things just did not compute for me. But I knew that something had to change, right? I knew that there had to be something that I was missing because I had done every single thing that I was supposed to do and I had achieved all the things and I wasn't feeling the way. So finally I was like, well, fuck it. My way isn't working. I need to have a different conversation. So the energy game was the doorway for me, but then really understanding the embodiment of masculine and feminine energy actually showed me, how do I do this in my day-to-day life? How do I be a person who chose this time, space, reality, who chose to be here now in the world of social media and technology and all of this? What do I do and how do I dream? So that's really what the feminine energy archetypes are about. That's really kind of been my journey with it. And I think for me, it's, A, step one is understanding you create reality, but then B is understanding how. And how was what was missing for me for so many years. I would read and I would read and I would study and I would do the things and I would do the journaling and the results didn't change, right? And I would look at myself and I'd be like, I'm doing all the things I don't understand. And it was because, again, this imbalance that I think that we have, where we have this intellectual understanding of something and we're willing to put in the effort, but we don't understand how to make the two work together. So my intention in really explaining these archetypes to you over this next couple of weeks is to help you understand the how of how do we do this. So the first thing I want to do is really define the archetypes, right? So there are three core feminine energy archetypes of the uncensored self. And the first one is the doer, right? That's our masculine energy. There's the dreamer, that's our feminine energy. And then the alchemist is when we are in this really beautiful place where our energies are balanced and we're able to ebb and flow back and forth between our energy in a way that creates really magical things. And every woman I know that I work with really is stuck of one of the two, right? I do know women that are stuck most of you are stuck in the doer, but I do still have some dreamers that are not doing the things that they want to do. They're just going through their life and checking boxes. But we're not in that place of the alchemist where we're using the energy to do the heavy lifting for us. Most of the women I know are still in the place where they're using that doer energy. And so the doer is obviously masculine dominant, right? Lives in structure, action, performance, achievement, very stereotypical prescription for success, right? She is driven by pressure, by timelines, by obligation. And what's real fucked up about our doer energy is that she gets results, but it's usually at the cost of our peace, of our joy, of our freedom. And that was 100% 10% my stories. And also why I think it gets so stuck. We wind up almost addicted to the results and addicted to the success and then everything that comes with that success, right? We start getting seen and respected, right? We get a little bit of respect and we get invited into rooms we weren't invited into before, right? We feel all of a sudden like we belong. We feel like, ooh, I'm finally achieving the things that I meant to, and it starts to feel good. But then again, it tips from this place of this feels really good to then it becomes a need, then it becomes an addiction. And that's where the pressure comes from and the obligation come from. But what the doer really believes is that control equals safety and that rest equals weakness, because that's what we were taught. And absolutely, positively, our emotions are a distraction because we don't have time to deal with those. We have work to do. The doer is the strong one, the provider, the one that everybody relies on. But the shadow of the doer winds up being resentment, burnout, and really detachment from joy and intuition. So again, things like action and performance and achievement are not inherently bad until they become an addiction, until it takes over, until you don't know how to operate in any other way. Or even when you desire to operate in any other way, you now have a belief system that, again, I have to touch everything, I have to fix everything, I can do this. And like I said, this energy is so powerful and so important. And she really thrives when she is balanced by the dreamer. So the dreamer is our feminine dominant energy, right? She lives in vision, she lives in feeling, she lives in creativity, she lives in intuition, right? She's connected to softness, to desire, to imagination, to receiving, to letting things be easy, right? The dreamer knows that there's more. I think that all of us have a dreamer inside of us. I don't think you would be listening to this show right now if there was not a dreamer inside of you dying to get out. You can feel it, right? But where the dreamer becomes unhealthy is that she lacks structure. She lacks boundaries. She doesn't trust herself, right? She doubts herself. She looks a lot for external validation. That winds up becoming our unhealthy dreamer, right? When we have no boundaries, we're like, well, I love doing, I love taking care of people. So I just, I pour and I pour and I pour, right? Like I just keep pouring out of my cup. But what winds up happening is that when we get too far in that dreamer energy, we lose touch of what's really important. So the shadow really of I think of that dreamer energy is indecision. avoidance, scattered energy, feeling ungrounded, and ultimately feeling unsafe, right? Because when we overperform in the doer energy, that's where the nervous system, the fight or flight often comes from feeling stimulated all of the time. So then when we try to slow down, it starts to feel unsafe, right? So even if you've been in your doer energy and you try to dip into this dreamer energy, it winds up feeling unsafe because rest feels unsafe, right? It either feels unsafe or it feels weak, right? Or it feels not productive. So, like I said, most women are stuck, are either, stuck in the doer or exhausted, right? Or we've swung too far into the dreamer and felt like nothing is landing. And honestly, I think that happened to me in this journey in the very beginning where it was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to go into dreamer. I want no structure. I want no boundaries. It's just going to ebb and flow. And the magic is in the two working together. That's why God sourced the universe, whatever you believe in, gave us both. I don't think that we are supposed to just operate in one or the other. It is literally just what we have been taught. And then, like I said, there's this fucked up thing where it creates results and then we get caught in it. So the archetypes exist. It's because this isn't just personality, it's actually programming, right? We obviously live in a world, especially when it comes to business, that rewards masculine energy. The doing, the producing, the controlling, the fixing, all of those things. We get such dopamine hits from that. We have so much of our value wrapped up in being the person who gets shit done. It's so fun to be able to be like, here, look, I fixed this for you. Here, look, I did this, right? And then we get to, oh my God, thank you so much. You're amazing, right? And that feels good for just a second, just a second. And then we're like, okay, on to the next. And then we don't even revel in the appreciation of that, right? And so as women, we've been taught that success comes from being competent, capable, and emotionally contained, because that is the example that we have been set, right? We have been taught to suppress our softness, our sensitivity, our sensuality, even, right? We're told those parts are weak or unsafe, or they do not have a place in our professional lives. And so what we wound up doing is we hardened, we became doers, we stopped dreaming, we stopped listening, and then we wondered why our success doesn't feel good. And so if you're listening right now and this is like you're feeling uncomfortable or you're feeling that feeling in your body where like, fuck, there's something here, there's not anything wrong with you, right? Like I said, it is just programming. It is just what you have been taught. And you can literally unlearn this and relearn how to use your energy together, really, step into the alchemist energy and create magic and not have to sacrifice your goals, not have to sacrifice happiness and fulfillment, right? Again, that need to sacrifice everything is very much masculine energy. And like I said, we have sacrificed everything to the point of sacrificing ourselves. And so now we don't even have any energy to be the doer. So we can't even create the results that we have anymore. And our worthiness is so wrapped up in that now we feel like shit because we can't even create the results anymore. What the fuck is wrong with us, right? And while competence, I tell Derek all the time how sexy I think competence is, right? And how being capable is really great, but it loses that emotional magic that we have as women. Our emotions are not something to be feared. Our emotions are actually guidance, right? The thing that we have taught to ignore is actually the guidance system that God sourced the universe to give us to tell us whether or not we are on track to getting what we want, right? Your negative energy, I don't even like the word negative. I'm going to take that back, right? Our emotions are information. When you're feeling negative, anxious, overwhelmed, stressed, you are out of alignment with the version of you who gets everything that she wants. When you are feeling happy, joyful, excited, connected, when things feel fun and passionate and interesting, you are in energetic alignment with getting every single thing that you want. And we have been taught that emotional guidance system, as Abraham calls it, cannot be trusted because there is no space for that, right? So the archetypes exist. So we learn, how do we use our emotions in a productive way? Because there is a way, right? We've all certainly had those moments where we have gone full into the dreamer, but again, unhealthy dreamer, to where the fire inside of us has come out and we have been enraged and we have been angry and we've lost our shit in people and we've been told that we're unreasonable and that the bitch comes out at that point in time, right? We've all been there. So we don't know how to actually work with our emotions. But when we learn emotional intelligence, we learn how powerful our emotions actually are. And then how to balance is when we step into that alchemist. It's when we step into truly being our power. So the downside of being stuck in either energy, I think, is a really important conversation, because the woman in full doer energy, she can't stop. She's always on. She never relaxes, right? It's hyper productive, but emotionally numb. Things are getting done. You're checking the list. It looks great. You're getting the awards and the accolades and the followers. And oh my gosh, you're doing such a great job. And did you see so and so? She's such a badass. But like, you can't remember the last time you laughed, much less the last time you cried, right? You feel completely guilty resting. You feel unsafe receiving. Anything that somebody gives you can't be trusted because you didn't earn it. You didn't work hard enough for it, right? And then you micromanage everything because control is your only really known currency. So that is the downside of doer energy. Again, tipping us into the unhealthy, right? Because always on is not productive, right? We are literally, we have to rest. Our bodies are built to rest, and hyper productive. And like I said, what I learned when I started playing this game, guys, is so many of the things that I thought were so important and so critical to success actually were not at all what I needed, right? Not at all really what was moving the needle. It was just this thing to make it look good. I looked like I was earning what it was that I wanted, right? And we'll talk a lot about this over the series, is like, how do we then leverage this in a healthy way? But what I'm really painting this picture for you today is why I developed this, because the woman in her full dreamer energy, she feels called to more, but she doesn't know how to bring it forward, right? She avoids the hard conversations. She struggles to act. She lives in her journal or her vision board, but she never really feels grounded. She feels unworthy of having support, afraid to be fully seen. She doesn't trust her ideas. She doesn't trust herself in any capacity, right? So we're now in this unhealthy dreamer energy. And sometimes we do both. That's what's really kind of the mind fuck about this, is you're like, oh, that's a little bit, I'm always on and I'm super hyper productive. But sure enough, anytime I think about hiring an assistant or getting support, I get really, really uncomfortable. Or anytime I feel myself on the edge of something really exciting, I pull myself back, or I make excuses, or I self-sabotage. So sometimes we do both, right? So what I feel like has been missing is the alchemist, right? Neither the doer nor the dreamer is wrong, but neither is whole. The real power is in the integration, in becoming the alchemist. The alchemist is the woman who knows when to act and when to receive. She trusts her intuition. She takes bold, aligned action. She's powerful because she's present. She's magnetic because she's safe in her body, right? So she holds her boundaries, but she's also soft. She has vision, but she executes, right? There is strategy, but there's also surrender to the idea that sometimes you just have to fucking go with your gut. And that idea was not an accident and you've got to go, right? She doesn't chase, she creates, right? So to me, the doer is the chasing energy, and the dreamer is the waiting energy, and the alchemist is the creative energy. It's when the two come together in really true integration, right? It's knowing when to bring which energy to which situation. That's where the emotional intelligence is so important. And so the reason why this is changing my work is because so much of what I taught before was strategy, mindset, marketing, business development, right? And it was still wrapped in doer energy. And even in just teaching the energy game, still winds up in this place of, this is something I have to go do. I have to go fix my thoughts. I have to go do something. And so I'm really shifting everything in the business to be built on this foundation of, you are the asset. Your energy is the strategy. And so learning how to work with your God-given, source-given gifts is only going to make it easier. Right. And so I rebuilt my flagship program, the Uncensored Self-Discovery Program, because it's been rebuilt through this lens, right? It really was this just very foundational. You are the creator of your reality, and how to really own your creator energy. But when we learn, what was missing again was the how, right? Because until we know which archetype we're leading from, we can't create with our full power. So just understanding that you're the creator of your reality is really, really great. But when you learn how to balance these things, it no longer becomes about fixing yourself, right? It's about reclaiming this wholeness and owning your energy and learning to work with it instead of against it. Because so much of what we've been doing for most of our lives, most of our careers, has been against our strengths, against our magic, against our gifts. And so we have been fighting against this gift that when used, it just happens so freely and so fun. So if you have really been feeling like something's off, right? Even though you're doing all the right things, I want you to ask yourself energetically, where have you been? Are you finding yourself stuck in this doer energy? Where have you been suppressing the dreamer, or where have you been using the dreamer for an excuse to not get to work, right? I'm just following my intuition over here. So I'm going to sit over here and watch Netflix all day, right? Like, what would it really feel like to integrate both our masculine and feminine energy? So, spending some time there, I think, is really, really important. But what I think it's understanding, and I think this is the how to of understanding how to become the woman you were meant to become, right? I've said that to you before here on the podcast. I have told you that the results, the money, the clients, the career all come as a result of the woman that you become. And I think that these energy archetypes, these feminine energy archetypes, and how to leverage that personal power inside of you is really going to change the game for so many women. It's really going to help us understand why we do the things that we do, because that's one of the biggest things is like, why do I do this to myself? Like, I feel it in my clients, they get frustrated, and I'll get these voice memos and they're like, why do I do this to myself? I know better, right? And it's because, again, habits and programming and learning and not really understanding how all the things work together. And I'm a lot like you in that I have a brain that does better when it understands. So to me, the feminine energy archetypes allow us to understand all of the magic inside of us so we don't feel like we're floating away, right? I find so much spiritual, personal development, manifestation, intentional reality creation stuff out of touch with reality. That's why it didn't resonate with me. I found these women like living in in huts in jungles, which is amazing if that's your jam. But for me, that's not what I want. I want to live, I want to live a human experience where I experience things like material success, and I experience nice homes and night vacations. And, I experience being able to drive the car I want to drive, but I also experience, a relationship that makes me feel like helps me come alive, and having a partner in life who I can lean on and trust and allow myself to really, truly be led, because that's where magic is, right? Like, I want it all. And I think you want it all as well. So to me, this download came through as this is such a way for us to understand how to step into that power, how to become the woman that is the energetic match to all the things that we want, right? Because the question I ask my clients over and over and over again, you've seen this in all the conversations, is who am I? But I'm not being who the world taught us to be. We have been taught that in order to be successful in our careers, we have to be doers. And actually, what I believe you're going to find, and what I found is when I leaned into the dreamer more and then really learned how to channel the alchemist, is when life got so much fun, because you were never meant to be the person who was always on. You were not meant to be somebody who never rested. You were not meant to be somebody who never got to take a break. You were never meant to be somebody who gives and gives and gives and never gets, right? You are not meant to be this person who has to suffer and sacrifice. That is not who you were meant to be. It is simply who the world taught you to be. So my intention for you as you go through this podcast series, as you really follow along in the content, you're going to see this really cool campaign unroll as we start talking about the uncensored self-discovery, is you're really going to learn that you are so much more powerful than you think. And when you learn to harness your personal power and play with the doer when it's appropriate, and the dreamer when it's appropriate, and the alchemist when it's appropriate, you're going to have such better, not just results, such a better experience of life. And it almost feels like cheesy and cliche to say that, but it really, really is true. So, or it is true in my personal experience. That's what I want to say. It is true in my personal experience that when we learn to balance these energies and really learn the power of the alchemist, is when life gets to be good, like pinch me good. The results don't make sense good, that this is really what I'm living and this is how my life is good, right? But as long as we make it about something outside of us, as long as we make it about results, as long as we make it about achieving, as long as we make it about chasing something, it's always going to be out of balance. It's learning, when do we do and when do we receive, right? When, and all of that. So I'm going to break down in subsequent podcasts each individual archetype. We're going to really take a deep dive into that, and really understanding that energy. And also, those of you that are following along and you're already like, this is amazing, I'm here for this, I want to invite you to check out the Uncensored Self-Discovery. It's going to be, I'm re-releasing the content. If you want to check out the program, there's 2 different ways to go through it, right? So the first way to go through it is one-on-one. It's completely private. You get access to the curriculum, and then you get access to me. But also there's the self-study version. But what's really cool about the self-study version this time around is that I'm actually teaching live. So I'm going to reteach and teach live. So it is self-study in that there's not in the fact that you'll just be going through the course in the program. But when I teach live, I'm always going to leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So you're going to be able to get some support there too. But I'm also going to include 2 integration calls. So because we're re-releasing the work, I'm really excited about it. So the self-study version is going to be super duper meaty. The one-on-one version is stellar. I've walked a dozen women through it. It's fucking killer. And the results are bananas. So whatever feels most aligned for you, whatever feels most aligned for where you're at financially right now, I think is a great fit. If you have questions, please reach out to me. I want to talk to you. I want to, I want to hear your questions. I want to hear, what's coming up for you. If this is something that you think that this is a path for you, if this conversation about masculine and feminine energetics is like, okay, I need to lean into this work, let's talk. And I'll see you in the next episode where we're going to break down the doer even more. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Uncensored Self podcast. If this conversation cracked something open for you, trust that that's the work, and share this episode with a woman in your life who's ready to stop performing and start creating. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave a review. It helps this message reach the women who need it most. Remember, you're the creator. The rules are yours, and your uncensored self, she already knows what to do. Keep leading, keep listening, keep becoming.